time it is. It's time to talk about Shadowhunters. So episode 16 has aired, Day of Atonement. This episode was directed by Paul Wesley of Vampire Diaries fame. He did a great job on this, so shout out to him. I feel like this episode was a bit more slowed down than the episodes we've had recently. There was less action in it. It was more focused on conversation. That made sense in my head, but it doesn't really make sense. But I do feel like it was less focused on the action and more focused on the characters and what they're going through. So to start off, I want to talk about Valentine and Sebastian. Last week, Valentine discovered that the boy hiding as Sebastian was actually Jonathan, his son. So I know Jonathan is called Jonathan, but I'm going to keep calling him Sebastian because I always see him as Sebastian. I never think of him as Jonathan. He's Sebastian to me, so I will keep calling him Sebastian. So this week we see a lot of scenes between Valentine and Sebastian in this cabin that Valentine used to spend a lot of time in. It's in Idris, and apparently this is the place where Sebastian grew up. Jace also spent time there as well. So I'm assuming this is the show's version of the manor. Instead of having the manor like we do in the books, we have this cabin. These scenes between Sebastian and Valentine, I really enjoyed them. They were so tense and terrifying. I just can't believe how good Will Tudor is at portraying this really creepy character. I mentioned last week that we keep having these two different sides of Sebastian. We have the creepy guy when he's alone, and then we have the good guy at the Institute. This week we just focused on evil Sebastian. We also found out what the burned flesh look was about. Sebastian talks about his childhood and about how he must have killed a boy and he got so out of control that Valentine sent him to Edam. The demons there then peeled off his skin because they thought he looked too pretty and too human. I loved how Sebastian explained this. Also, I can't remember if any of the things Sebastian said in this episode actually happened in the books or not. It's been so long since I've read all of the books that I honestly can't remember that much about Sebastian before we got to meet him in the books. I do know that he definitely didn't have his skin peeled off in the books, I know that much for sure. But when he was talking about the stuff that he did as a child, I can't exactly remember how much of that is true to the stories. But in the show, the way he talked over that was really chilling. I feel like Valentine in this episode as well still seemed quite intimidated by Sebastian, especially when he was talking about the things he'd done in his childhood. And even though Valentine was saying that Sebastian was his greatest creation and that he was proud of him for skinning wolves and stuff, I still did feel like there was a certain level of intimidation in Valentine. He strikes me as being in awe of him, but also scared of him at the same time. We also found out that it was Azazel that got Sebastian out of Edam in the first place. Sebastian's plan in this episode is to send Valentine there so that he can go through what Sebastian had to go through. This revenge plot that he had in mind doesn't really work out. Sebastian has the soul sword and he gives it to Valentine with the intention of him taking it to Edam with him, but then Valentine ends up talking about how much he's proud of Sebastian whilst he's holding the sword, so that Sebastian knows he's not lying. See, Sebastian is just convinced that his father hated him, didn't care about him, favoured the other boy, which of course was Jace. So when Valentine speaks the truth whilst he's holding the sword, that changes Sebastian's opinion. At the end of the episode, when Clary, Jace and Izzy arrive at the cabin, I knew that Sebastian hadn't sent Valentine to Edam. One of the things he wants most is for his father to be proud of him. So hearing Valentine say those things changed his mind. Instead of getting revenge on Valentine, at the end of the episode, we see the two of them sitting down for dinner together. What a happy little father and son moment. The way that the two of them looked at each other over that table at the end though, I really don't know what's going on with them. Does Sebastian really want to work with Valentine, or does he have a bigger plan in mind? Who knows, but I really appreciated that final scene of them. They're so creepy. I loved Will and Alan so much in this episode. Those scenes between them were just really powerful. We've got some great villains on this show. In this episode we have Jace and Clary who decide to go looking for Valentine. They are supposed to search Staten Island, But of course, Jace doesn't believe that Valentine's going to be there. He remembers this cabin from his childhood, so he tries to get permission to go to Idris. He doesn't get the portal approved. Whilst he's explaining this to Clary, she looks at the map of Idris and she sees a rune. That rune allows her to create a portal. I really love that we got to see Clary creating her runes again in this episode because I've missed her doing that. And that portal one is an impressive rune. Her and Jace go off to Idris and of course they end up in the lake. They don't know it yet, but the lake is the third mortal instrument. They don't know about the effects that it has on a person who swallows the water from the lake. So like in the books, Clary ends up drinking some of the water accidentally and starts having hallucinations. Because Jace didn't swallow any, he's completely fine. But Clary imagines that he's been taken away and she goes in search of him and she has this really trippy journey through the woods. She ends up seeing Ithoriel, the angel that we saw in the first half of the season. Of course, he looks completely different to what he did then because in the first half of the season he was not in a great state, whereas this time he's all shiny and healthy looking. I'm not too sure how I felt about Ithoriel in this episode. When I was reading the books, I didn't picture angels looking that human. So yeah, seeing Ithoriel as a man dressed up as some sort of gladiator type angel, it wasn't what I pictured, but I didn't really expect anything more from the show anyway. There's only so much you can do when it comes to trying to accurately show what angels look like. I did like the scene when he flew off though. I thought that was really impressive. The conversation between the two of them was really brief. Ithoriel said that Jonathan was alive, and of course Clary thinks that he means Jace because she was searching for Jace. He doesn't mean that! Later on in the episode, Izzy ends up in Idris. She now knows that the lake gives hallucinations when she finds Jace. The two of them have to go in search of Clary as quickly as they can. When they find her, she's not in a good way. She doesn't really know who they are. She ends up breaking Izzy's stele and impressively fights the two of them off for quite a while. But Jace does manage to get a hold of her and he uses his own angelic power of activating runes himself. It was nice to see Clary and Jace working together again in this episode because obviously there has been a lot of drama between them. We had quite a few scenes with the Lightwoods in this episode. Robert ends up back in the Institute after Valentine doesn't show up in Idris. The Claves send an envoy to check things out and that envoy is Robert. I feel like the Robert we saw in this episode was a little bit closer to the Robert that we see in the books. Because I thought in the first season, Robert was actually a lot nicer than I expected him to be. He was fairly understanding. Whereas in this episode, we had him talking about blackmail, saying a few things that weren't taken well. So he was more like the Robert I expected originally, which I'm really happy about. I especially loved the conversation that he had with Alec. When Alec was bringing up Robert's affair, Robert tried to use Magnus and Alec in his own defense by saying that Alec of all people should know what it's like to fall in love with someone when you shouldn't. And I love the way Alec immediately shot him down with the Magnus isn't an affair comment. There's nothing I like more than Alec shutting down his parents. In this episode we find out that Robert has been blackmailing to keep Alec as head of the Institute because we know from previous episodes that Imogen really wanted Jace as head of the Institute. So she probably saw this mess up as her opportunity to get rid of Alec, but that doesn't happen because Robert uses the knowledge that the Clave doesn't have the soul sword in their possession as a way to blackmail Imogen. He tells Alec about this, and what I loved was before he said that, he tried to make Alec promise that he wouldn't tell anyone about it, and Alec immediately said that he couldn't promise that. And it's one of the things that I love about Alec's character. He doesn't make promises that he can't keep because he's honest and he wants to do things the right way. He doesn't like keeping secrets from the people that he loves. So I love that he stood up to Robert with that as well. I also want to talk about how much I appreciated Alec putting the Institute first in this episode, even though he knows Jace is in Idris and he doesn't know what's happening to him. He agrees to stay put at the Institute because that has to be his priority. It just showed how much he takes his role as head of the Institute seriously. Again, it's just showing this good side to his character, and it shows why he deserves to be in that position as well. I love how he said that he was sending his best Shadowhunter though, and that was Izzy. I just love the Lightwood sibling relationship. It's just so perfect. I am really interested to see what happens after this episode. What Alec's going to do with the information that he knows now about the Soul Sword. It's going to be interesting to see how his role as head of the Institute changes after this. Another character that we focused on a lot this episode is Simon. I completely adored his scenes in this episode, especially because they were with Maya. I have missed scenes between the two of them. Maya shows up to try and get Simon out of bed. It's clear that he hasn't really been doing much since everything happened with Clary. He's obviously been isolating himself, so Maya arrives to try and suggest some things to get him out there. He tells her that he's going to have dinner with his family for Yom Kippur. I love that we got to see that in this episode because, again, we're seeing more of Simon's life as a Jewish person. I say this time and time again, but I really appreciate the way the show does that. And also, I love that we got to see a family dinner because we don't get to see Simon's family very often because it's more focused around the Institute and the Shadowhunters. So we see more of the Lightwoods than any other family. So it was really nice to just go back to Simon's normal life. Maya insists on coming with him, so he shows up at his house with her and she immediately says that she's his girlfriend. I loved the face on Simon's grandma because you could tell immediately that she approved. These dinner scenes were my favourites in this episode because I have been really desperate to see Simon back with his family again. After everything that he's been through, I feel like he needs that normality in his life. So to see him and Maya sitting around that table and talking about normal things, it made a really refreshing change to what they're normally going through. I love that we got to find out about Maya taking online classes. It helps us get to know her character and more about what she wants. We also had the confessions that they do as part of this dinner. We had Simon's mother opening up about her relapse with her drinking, and I thought that was such a great scene. Yeah, just everything about these family moments were just so brilliant. And then afterwards as well, we had that conversation between Simon and Maya where Simon thought that Maya had just made up the story about the online classes and wanting to do marine biology. And she mentions that she is actually doing that. And that's when Simon realises that he doesn't ever ask questions about Maya and what she wants. I actually find the two of them really cute in the show, which is a surprise to me because in the books, I really wasn't about Simon and Maya. I think I was just so focused on Simon and Izzy that I didn't really care for any of the other romantic entanglements that Simon got into throughout the course of the series. But in the show, I really love scenes between the two of them, and I just adore Maya as a character, and I'm glad that we got to see a lot more of her in this episode because she is one of those characters that we get a few scenes from and then she'll disappear for a few weeks. So I do appreciate it when we get an episode that is more focused on her. So yeah, I am surprised that I like the two of them so much in the show, but I just think they work really well together. I would not complain about seeing more Simon and Maya. I definitely wouldn't complain about seeing more Maya. We just need more Maya in our lives. She did open up about her home life in this episode as well. I really hope that we do get a bigger insight into Maya's life before she became a wolf, which I'm sure we will at some point because we still need Jordan to come into the show. That's gonna happen eventually. So I am looking forward to hearing more stories from her past. Another thing that I wanted to mention, at the end of the episode, we had Jace going through journals of Valentine's that he found in the cabin, and this is where he sees Valentine's comments on the experiments he was doing on not only Jace but also Sebastian. The two of them are listed in the books. One is Jonathan Herondale and one is Jonathan Morgenstern. As Clary is reading through them, she sees there are some from 10 years ago, and that is when she realises that Jonathan must still be alive. This brother of hers that she thought had died in a fire must still be out there somewhere. Little does she know she's already been interacting with him, so she now knows that he's alive, and obviously she's going to go in search of him, as you would do if you knew you had a brother out there. So that's about it with regards to this episode that I can think of to talk about. I forget to mention loads of things every week, so as always, if there is something you want to discuss, then leave it in the comments. I've seen the promo for next week. The only thing that I took away from it was the fact that we saw Max. We know that Sebastian is present, and now we know that Max will be present. No. no, not ready for that. So we will see how the next episode plays out. So please do let me know all of your thoughts and feelings on this episode. I will be back again next week to talk about episode 17, where Max will be alive and thriving at the end of it. Honestly, he will. He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!